Good evening, or good afternoon, sorry. I'm rushing through my day. This is a meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I'm Chair of the committee, Mark Conway, and representative of the 4th District. I'm joined here today by Vice Chair Zach Blanchard of the 11th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Felicia Porter of the 10th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Paris Gray of the 8th District. Representing the Mayor's Office, I have Isaiah Griffith here. And I don't see a representative from the Council President's office here, but I'm sure they'll join us in a bit. This is a committee hearing for LO 25-0025, Underground Infrastructure Safety. I'll start off with a few comments, maybe a little bit of history and perspective. Baltimore's conduit system was built because public safety required it. At the turn of the 20th century, the city faced repeated urban fire risks caused by overhead electric and communications lines. After the Great Fire, the Great Baltimore Fire on February 7th and 8th of 1904, Baltimore confronted a structural question about how infrastructure should be built in a dense and growing city. Beginning in the 1900s, the mayor and city council required utilities to place their lines underground in a municipally owned conduit system. The purpose was to reduce ignition sources, limit the spread of fire, and protect life and property and ensure that we had reliable service. Baltimore became one of the earliest major American cities to build and retain public ownership of citywide underground conduit networks. Most major cities eventually transferred that ownership of their conduits to electric utilities, but Baltimore did not. That decision preserved public control over critical infrastructure that every resident and every business depends on today. When the people of Baltimore later were asked to sell this asset outright, they voted no. They chose to keep this system in public hands. And that vote affirmed a simple principle, that infrastructure built for public safety must remain accountable to the public. We're here because that system has experienced some serious safety failures in the recent history. The RTI report describes combustible gases generating over time in an enclosed manhole, underground infrastructure operating beyond the original design intent, and insufficient separation between power and communication lines, and a prior fire in January that contributed to the September explosion. These findings describe a system under sustained structural strain, not a random anomaly. The question before us is actually quite direct. Did the current conduit agreement preserve clear, enforceable lines of safety accountability, or did it introduce operational ambiguity at the very point where structural risk demands decisive action? If the risk was developing gradually in an aging, congested environment, and if those conditions were visible, then someone had both the authority and the obligation to act. If the authority and obligation were divided, discretionary or unclear, then the structure of this agreement may allow the risk to persist. As we approach the final phase of this agreement, we'll have to determine whether or not its framework aligns safety responsibly, the safety responsibility with the decision-making power. If it doesn't, then restructuring is warranted. And if restructuring cannot correct the structural misalignment, then more fundamental consideration, including an exit, must be examined with all seriousness. The hope is for this hearing to really build on that record and to have an open and robust conversation about the structure of that agreement and whether or not it meets the challenges that we have today. With that, we have a few folks in attendance from the city and from outside of the city that are going to be here today to talk about the findings in the agreement and also to talk about the operational challenges. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have everybody up here introduce yourself for the record, and I'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Khalil Zaid, Deputy Mayor for Operation, Baltimore City.
Sterling Sumwalt, Senior Manager, BG&E Conduit Division.
Con Rafferty, Director of Regional Operations for BG&E.
Samay Kindra, Government Affairs Manager for Vicinity Energy.
Mike Parazio, Vice President, Vicinity Energy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kevin Haggerty, CEO, Vicinity Energy.
Good afternoon, Mark Shebist, Senior Assistant People's Counsel for the Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Good afternoon, James Wallace, Chief of the Baltimore City Fire Department.
Please.
Patrick Fleming, Chief of Staff, Baltimore City Department of Transportation.
Josh Taylor, Conduit Field Manager.
Stephen Salisbury, Deputy City Solicitor.
Good afternoon. Ola Olamide, Conduit Division Chief.
Isaiah Griffith, Local Affairs Liaison, Mayor's Office of Government Relations.
And Veronica Macbeth, Director, Baltimore City DOT.
Thank you. I understand today we have a presentation from DOT outlining the RTI report, and so I'll hand it off to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, again, my name is Patrick Fleming. I'm Chief of Staff for Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We're here today to share updates and answer any questions on the underground safety efforts. There we go. We will be discussing the findings and recommendations of the city's December report on the underground fires that were released on December 30th, 2025. The report prepared by RTI Consulting mainly focused on the September 29th, 2024 fire. It highlighted the issues of aging and crowded infrastructure, a perennial issue for older cities like Baltimore. We will go through, the report made 14 recommendations, which are summarized here, but we will cover each recommendation in this presentation. Recommendation A, cable separation. We know that overcrowding is concentrated in downtown. In the short term, and due to limited underground real estate, we're working with the conduit system lessees to reduce overcrowding at existing manholes. The report recommends that electrical and fiber optic cables are separated in the system. DOT conduit policy prohibits these cables from sharing the same conduit ducts. Here is, as highlighted in recommendation A, is the before and after. This is the picture that was highlighted in the report from, I believe it was March of 2024, and the picture on the right was taken at the end of February, and it shows the ongoing reconstruction at the same manhole to improve underground space and reduce crowding. Recommendation B is about enlarging manholes. DOT conduit will keep a database of manholes to be prioritized for upgrades in the future. New manholes and manhole reconstruction are done to modern specifications, which seek to maximize size given the constraints of real estate underground. Recommendation C is about enhanced monitoring. We've worked with peer agencies to learn what they do and what will be needed to monitor our system. We've determined that we would need sensors that are able to look at heat, gas, humidity, and water. Network connectivity to ensure we have real-time access to this data, and a central platform to monitor all these inputs that our staff can be alerted. Recommendation D is to develop a risk map. We've been using data to assess our risk and prioritize our preventative efforts. DOT conduit has identified critical and high-risk parts of the system. This information is kept confidential to protect assets from vulnerability. Recommendation E is for utility-scaled database. The conduit division maintains a database of all underground utility installations. This is paired with a robust GIS system that provides the recommended detail. Recommendation F is about safety plans. Separately, the fire department has taken steps to improve the city's response in underground fires and has developed plans for future incidents in the system. Recommendation G is to obtain specialized firefighting equipment. The fire department is in the process of acquiring and maintaining the carbon dioxide truck. Recommendation H is to have regular underground safety meetings. The conduit division participates in a monthly utility coordination meeting. The meeting is focused on reducing conflicts between DOT and utility projects. Conduit's participation is focused on underground safety efforts. Additionally, we're working with emergency management to develop written standards for communication and incident documentation. Recommendation I is asked that we explore manhole venting and tethering. Manhole venting is inadvisable at this time as it would allow additional contaminants into the conduit system, such as snow and salt brine, which are especially problematic as they can corrode underground infrastructure. The Conduit Division is still looking at manhole tethering as suggested. Recommendation J is about building code enforcement. The lack of fire stop plugs was identified as a potential risk factor in the report. We are working with the Housing Department to clarify fire safety standards to be consistent with the National Building Code recommendations. Recommendation K is for the retention of available video documentation. When events occur, we will request City Watch camera footage surrounding the incident to better understand each incident, and we will make sure that this is part of our emergency response moving forward. Recommendation L is to preserve physical evidence. DOT Conduit will continue to work with lessees to ensure forensic evidence preserved and examined as needed. Recommendation M is to continue testing physical evidence. We may conduct further laboratory testing as needed to understand the cause of each fire. We will determine the next steps for testing of remaining materials as outlined in the report. And the final report recommendation is that electrical and fiber optic infrastructure be stored in separate manhole chambers. As mentioned under recommendation A, we are working to increase separation between electrical and fiber optic cables. The design and installation of these is greatly restricted by the availability of space in the system. This is especially true in downtown. And this concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge Councilwoman McCray joining us from the 2nd District. I'm going to open up to questions from committee members. I've got a line of questions myself. And just to sort of couch for everyone here, what I think is really important is first to understand what caused these fires and then to articulate why the interventions that we're recommending are going to prevent them from happening in the future. And I think to my opening statement, one of the most important considerations is going to be the apparatus that we use to execute some of the changes that we need to execute, including expansion and monitoring systems and otherwise. A lot of that is currently happening under an agreement that we just rolled out maybe 3 years ago with BGE. And I want to get into some of those components here. So if you'll bear with me, I have a couple of questions that I want to dive into, and then I'll jump to my colleagues, and we'll start with a round of questioning. So first, this is a question, I guess, for the city and probably DOT. How old is the conduit infrastructure in this corridor? And what is the expected design lifetime?
Just to clarify, you're talking in the Charles Street corridor?
Charles Street, yes.
Okay. I have to defer to Ola about that.
The conduit infrastructure is about 100 years old plus.
Okay, and so this has been developing over time is what you theoretically find?
We had done a streetscaping project in 2001, 2002, and the conduit system at the time was replaced. So around this specific conduit system, 2002.
Okay. What was the original structural design capacity for manhole 87 in terms of cable occupancy and separation standards? In that photo you showed, Patrick, that was manhole 87, and in the report it had details about overcrowding and otherwise. So what is the design capacity for that manhole?
I just want to clarify, the current design that is being implemented today that is under reconstruction, or the previous one?
You just made an extra question. You can answer both. Both when the fire happened and now if we've made changes. I'm not aware of the changes yet.
I'll defer to Josh or Ola about that, the specific specifications.
To the best of my knowledge, the design capacity is mostly the number of ducts that we have entering and exiting the manhole. In this particular case, that particular manhole, we had overcrowding. So it wasn't an issue of having too many cables in each duct, but just the space in there, and that there were a lot of splice boxes, a lot of extra cables. So it made the manhole overcrowded.
And so at the time of the fire in September of '24, it was overcrowded then, is what you would suggest?
Overcrowded from the standpoint of looking at the picture, you barely had enough space to fit somebody in there to do maintenance. With the new construction, we've created more space. It's a little bit bigger, and the plan is to have the cables better placed on the walls to make sure that whoever needs to access the manhole is able to.
Was going back to September 2024, or at least the last time we put eyes on that manhole, was it overcrowded then?
So that manhole's been crowded for some time, but after the fire, before that one, the January fire, that was in the sidewalk, we had started to have the fiber companies move some splice boxes so we could create some more room. So it was happening, and we were getting more room in there at that time.
And how often do we inspect manholes? Is that part of a regular monitoring, or?
What we do for the most part is, I believe we explained this the last time, that it's mostly a reactive system. We do not have the capacity right now to schedule these things on a periodic basis. So as the requests come in, either from the lessees trying to pull cables and stuff like that, that's usually the opportunity we have to go into a particular manhole and observe, do a quick inspection, check the walls, check the space of the crowding.
I see.
So before the fire, that manhole was not on a periodic inspection basis.
Got it. And the report details this. I remember this. There was a fire that happened in January of the same year of 2024, before the big fire and explosion in September. How do we escalate after? So in January, when we had the fire, we knew of the overcrowding, presumably after that fire. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And as Josh noted, they were working with lessees to begin the process of reducing the crowding in that location. It takes time and logistics for them to be able to evaluate where items can be placed within the conduit system to move it around.
To make the best of it.
Because it can't just simply be like picked up and moved the next day. So was part of the process, had begun the process to reduce the congestion in that location.
Yeah, if I can just jump in though, I mean, one of the important, it's important to keep in mind, we commissioned this report last in the summer of 2025.
Right.
And so I think that the concept, the connectivity between the amount of any levels of crowding and how that might have been connected to, a gas leak or an explosion, that was all, I think that's why we commissioned the report. And I think the report has shed some important light on that. So, but I just want to be clear about, that wasn't something that we necessarily had at the time of the January 2024 fire. So it's not as if at January 2024, we had sort of seen the full state of play and then said, okay, well, we now know what the potential causes are. So I just want to clarify that chronology of when we got the report and when the insights that, we learned from RTI, those are just really being implemented over the last couple months.
So we didn't know that overcrowding.
I mean, I just think that the concept of overcrowding, I think we had looked at the manhole. I think people could have seen, what that was. But I think that appreciating the significance of that, the way that we do in light of this report and the expert that we brought on to look at it, I wouldn't sort of impute that level of knowledge to where we were back in 2024. I think we know a lot more now than we did then, and that's why we commissioned the report.
Yeah, I think the trouble here for me is even January wasn't the first fire there. We knew we had issues over time. And the question then for me, as I sort of build up like how we should respond to these fires in the future, should we have them, hopefully we don't, is what is the proper course of action, one, to respond once we have a fire, and then given some of the recommendations in the report, expanding the conduit, adding monitoring systems and all these investments that they're recommending, we now know that those are the things that might help us prevent this from happening in the future. But even back then, we knew crowding was an issue. We knew that we were having fires, and we knew that we had explosions, including in this area, in periods before and in other parts of the city. So I think, and I'll hand off to my colleagues after this, but I think the question for me is how do we make sure that we are responsive when we do have a fire? Because these fires, if they happen once, they can happen again. And I think that has been sort of the theme of these hearings as we've had them. We want to make sure that they don't happen again to the best of our ability. And if we see the same manhole have a fire multiple times, it tells me that there's an issue in that manhole. And if there's an issue in that manhole and we believe that it's tied to overcrowding, now we know gas buildup and other things, how do we make sure that we have an appropriate response, whether it's monitoring, whether it's maintenance, whether it's capital expenditure, to prevent that from happening again?
And I'll turn it over to Josh in a second, but we couldn't agree more. I think these are all things that we need to be looking at. I think establishing, using this report to help inform what we're doing, I think is critical. And I think looking at all the things that you outlined absolutely is, what the DOT and as a city we're going to be doing. And I think you're right about, it's not just about preventing fires. There's a big part of this report about, if it does happen, making sure that our response is as quick and effective as possible, the coordination with the utilities, with the fire department. I think there are a lot of things that we want to be able to focus on, in the event these do happen in the future. But I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
I just wanted to clarify the January 24 fire and the September 24 fire were in separate holes. They're at the same location, just they're not in the same manhole. Same intersection.
And just one other thing, just to also be very clear about for the record, that manhole, the September 24, has been, I don't know if the construction is complete, but that is, we're well underway of reconstructing that manhole. So we're sort of talking about what has been, and that had actually started before the RTI report came out. But just so that everybody is clear about, steps that have been taken, that process is well underway. I don't know what the deadline is, but we'll defer to DOT on that. But just to be very clear about that.
Yeah, I like to add to that also. You're asking the question about what we have done since then to kind of prevent this thing from happening or avoiding in the future. And the inspection piece, and we start with doing the manual inspection now on regular basis, not enough, to do that. So we identified through the GIS system that we have, and we have a robust GIS system in the conduit that we have. We identify all those manholes that have risk. We call them risk manholes. And what we do manual, checking the temperature. We also have some sensors right now that we have in specific manholes to measure the temperature as well. So those will give us some ideas where we stand and where the risk is at some point. Now, is that enough? Well, probably not. We need to go further with that with a more robust sensor system throughout the city.
Thank you. I'm going to hand off to Vice Chair Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Coincidentally, this weekend at the library, my 3-year-old got a picture book called How a City Works, and it actually has like 2 pages on underground infrastructure. It was unfortunately way more simple than this. All jokes aside, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. It does seem like a pretty thorough effort to tackle a pretty confusing problem. I'll mention later the impact that it's had on the businesses on those couple of blocks which are in the district. But for now, the summary recommendations, like I said, seems really thorough, and I remember some of these things being discussed kind of in earlier hearings as well. What's the pathway to funding this? I'm not sure if this is for the director or the deputy mayor, but because if we have the recommendations, but we don't have a strategy to pay for the implementation, then we're liable to end up in the same situation, and it seems not cheap.
So obviously the conduit system is funded solely by an enterprise by all the occupants within the conduit system. And the time probably is good now to start having that conversation with all the occupants of the conduit system in order to identify funding for some of these issues that we're talking about right now.
So thank you, that's helpful. So the idea is that we've been charging, because it's enterprise fund, we've been charging the users at a rate that is enough to do what we've been doing, which has been not a ton. And so we'll need to figure out how to increase the rate that the users are being charged, so that way we can have a safe system and implement the aspects of these recommendations that need to happen.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so a portion of it is the sort of fees that folks pay to be within the conduit. And then there's a separate portion in the conduit agreement with BGE that is geared specifically towards capital expenditures within the conduit. And so those are 2 separate pots of money. Is that fair?
So there are multiple occupants within the conduit system, obviously. BGE holds probably 78% of the conduit system, and then you have the additional for the remaining 22%. The other 22%, the rate that they were paying is the same rate as that goes back to prior to this agreement, and that is something probably gonna have to, at some point, negotiate that, as well as, start having a conversation with all the occupants within the system at some point. Very soon.
Thank you, Deputy.
So you said go back to a rate agreement with BGE or with others?
We have an agreement with BGE that at this point, we probably have to start having a conversation with BGE again and having the conversation with all the occupants.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is, I think, not a committee request, but just a request for the committee at a future hearing. I think it is important to hear from the administration as well as the users how this, I imagine this is going to be a pretty complicated set of negotiations, and different sets of priorities will be in conflict. So I think that's an important thing. My concern is that inertia will be it'll be sort of it'll be hard to get things going and get the funding needed to implement the recommendations. So I do think that's an important thing to see how that's going in the future hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. At the previous hearing, I asked about the use of AI technology as it relates to identifying some preventative ways so that we're not using manpower. And Director, you're shaking your head because I think we cornered each other in the garage to talk about it. Can we just outline some of the progress there? I appreciate the sensories that you're putting in the underground conduit system, but to the chair's point, if there is a way that we can leverage technology to pinpoint issues beforehand so that we're kind of using a proactive model of approach, but also if there are any type of other issues associated with said conduit system. Can you share the progress of where we are on that front?
Yes, so from our research, the use of AI is tied to real-time technology.
That's correct.
So right now, we don't have, the goal is to install sensors to monitor heat, humidity, combustible gases. And until we have that system in place, we can't move to the next stage of leveraging that data in AI.
So just so that I'm clear, you're going to develop the sensory technology and infrastructure first, and then phase 2 is going to be the AI data management of it. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When do you think that you'll have the sensory system developed and or at least implemented?
We have identified a vendor.
Mm-hmm. Is this a single source vendor? Was this through an RFP process? What's the background?
So we've been talking to this particular vendor way before this fire, and we have some pricing. Right now, it's tied to, we have to get this vendor procured through the system and have the funding. Yeah.
Yes, and jump in. This is all related to the issue right now of the funding mechanism behind any new technology, any new thing that we need to be doing. So again, it goes back to having a conversation with a lot of the occupants of the conduit system. We define that, we create the funding that is needed, and we will create the funding that is needed for those technologies, for creating all these sensors everywhere that we need, and then we'll be doing that. So if we think about it from a timing perspective, I would say the negotiations will be done somehow by the end of this calendar year.
End of this calendar year?
Yes, the negotiation piece.
And negotiation, talk to me a little bit about
negotiations, I mean negotiations with all the occupants in terms of a new funding model for the conduit system.
And so by the end of the calendar year, you'll have a negotiation approach and also kind of a plan forward for implementation in calendar year 27.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's an official committee request, please. If we can make sure that happens by the end of the calendar year and that the director can report back to this committee with said plan.
You have a timeline?
So again, by the end of the year, if they get it to by the end of the year. Okay. Thank you. My second question actually has to do with the coordinating body that you all convene of all the conduit partners. Another question during the previous hearing was when you all actually were meeting. So have you all actually met with the partners? And when was the last time that you all have met?
I'll start and then you jump in if this. So they had two separate meetings as one of the questions that it was asked. The first meeting that happens as utility coordination meeting done by the design and construction group within the city that is inviting BGE and all the partners within the system. But this is also not necessarily involving all the people that we need specifically. However, conduit in its own
and Director, before you move forward, I'm talking about all of the leaders, so all of the CEOs of said partners, said conduit system. So we're talking about the heads of Vicinity, the heads of BG&E. Have you convened a meeting with all of those leadership?
Not a meeting with all the leadership at the same time, but we have done multiple meetings with many of them. So we met with Vicinity, we met with the leadership at BGE, and we met with some other occupants within the system, but is to say that we invited everybody.
Sure.
But however, what I think it's more effective and more efficient is the people who do the work on a daily basis.
Totally fine. So that's an official committee request as well. I'd like for you to meet with all of the heads of these conduit systems. And the reason why I said that before is, one, I understand that these are the folks that are going to, not necessarily do the work every day, but it is encompassed that the leaders of the organization are aligned on the mission and vision, so that when you're talking about the development and the implementation process, all parties are moving at the same, the same sheet of music. And so if that meeting can happen within a month, I'll give you a month and a half, that would be great. And report back to the committee the findings of that meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman McCray.
Yeah, we want more time for that one. Yeah.
I think we need more time. I just think.
So Director, this was a committee request, I believe, from the last hearing that I talked about, getting together the heads of each organization. So I'll give you 3 months.
Yes, I feel like that's very well.
3 months is fine, but just make sure that we get the meeting scheduled in 3 months and report back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Forgive me, Councilwoman. I was distracted for a second, didn't realize you were asking for a request. I'm going to hand off to Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for fires regarding recommendation G regarding the CARDOX truck, the carbon dioxide tank truck. What is the estimated cost for that?
Thank you, Councilwoman. So the truck itself could run as high as $1 million. What I'll say is anytime we purchase emergency equipment, it's based on the specifications that we use. So this truck in particular, part of the driver on the price is going to be the fact that it's so unique. This is not a common piece of equipment that you see the same way you would our ladder trucks and engines riding around. This vehicle itself needs to carry maybe 10,000 pounds of carbon dioxide on the vehicle in order to be effective. So it could run upwards of $1 million depending on specs.
And we were looking to share it with other counties in case they needed it for these type of fires. Would there be any share costs with any other counties that we would be sharing this with?
I think outside of what we know to be preventative maintenance sustainment, right, there's the product itself. So if the carbon dioxide was used, say there was a fire in Baltimore County like this, and we went out there and used it. We have mutual aid agreements with the county, so there's often a lot of trade-off back and forth on that. But that's an expendable supply that we could certainly talk with the counties about. It's not common that we do that, but it's certainly not out of the question either.
Has a budget request been submitted by your agency? I know this report is fairly recent. Has a budget request been submitted by your agency to the administration for the CARDOX truck?
No, ma'am. We've actually been in talks back and forth with DOT about the appropriateness of the vehicle, where we would stage it, maintain it, and things like that. So we've not reached a point where I'm comfortable saying it would be X. I think we need to, agree on what our needs are, and then we really submit something with, give the mayor's administration an informed proposal so that they could make a decision on that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gray.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for attending. I think the findings really illustrate the need for further collaboration between all parties. I know at the beginning, DOT, you guys stated that, and looking at Figure 1, you obviously see that it's, I don't know what other way to say it, but a mess, like everything's just touching each other, right? And you guys said that although you saw this, there wasn't any knowledge, or there was no way to say that this was going to be an issue. Am I correct in saying that? I believe someone earlier said that we saw this obviously, but we didn't think that it was an imminent threat or it was going to cause an explosion.
I don't know that I would say that, but it was that we were working to address the issue. It's just it had not occurred in the time frame in between. So I don't want to say that it was not an issue or that, but as Stephen pointed out, like we just didn't know kind of this report provided us with the clarity and insight of how those things work together to create this situation. So we're working to address them in the, now we know and can make the change.
Yeah. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, and the reality is when you're dealing with a street like Charles Street in specific, with it's if you look at the utility underground with between water, gas, conduit, it's like a spaghetti in there. So space or the availability of space in the system is very, very limited in some of the major roadways we have around the city or the major gateways around the city, and Charles Street definitely one of them.
Okay, and so I thank you for that, but now my question kind of goes towards the leases. I know that while DOT may have seen this and said, this is something we need to work on, I want to know from each of you if you saw it and you knowing, or maybe having subject matter experts more into the issues of why fiber optic and electrical wires shouldn't touch. Did anyone identify this issue and or send any type of notifications to DOT saying that this potentially can be an issue or will be an issue?
So for PG&E, if there's a issue with another leasee in the manhole that's preventing us access or is in close proximity, we do a fill out a report. That report's submitted to somebody in our office and it's entered into the 311 system. So any safety issue that we would report related to the structure or another leasee would be filed in the 311 system.
Okay, and when you put in whoever put in the 311 system, internally that you guys know of the severity of what could happen. And I only ask this is because if you knew potentially something bad could happen, we tell our extensions all the time, please send to 311 if it's an issue, but if it's something of emergency, please call or email the council person or whoever you need to reach out to. And so I guess I'm posing this question in the same vein, I understand that it could be an issue. I know you weren't personally down there, but if there is something where we obviously know now that these cables touching can cause an issue, especially with the gas buildup, I think a 311 is probably
so just to
more
clarify,
than a 311 is needed.
That's the form of record, right? So
Gotcha.
we always have contact with the city inspector. Is always on our sites we enter a manhole. So first the crew makes contact with the city inspector, lets know the situation. We do we call it a white sheet that we fill out. That sheet's entered into 311 for the system of record and tracking and accountability. And then we also follow up with Josh and his team, which is the inspectors. So there's a verbal communication, not just a paper. That's just the system of record for accountability.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So I think we would regard vicinity as an adjacent utility. So we don't typically use in fact, we don't use the conduit. We may or may not be adjacent to the conduit, but understand the concern if it's something that is, that we observe or is highlighted while we're out doing our routine inspections on our system, understood that we would, we can talk with our teams to ensure that we raise the issue if we do see it. But that being said, we don't typically open the conduit, monitor the conduit, or have anything to do with the conduit other than running utilities sometimes adjacent to it.
Okay, thank you. I just think that, while this is the responsibility of the city, I think we should all be good stewards and everyone should be protecting their own investment, even if we're just thinking in a selfish way. That if we see these types of things, it's being reported and it's being documented, because it's hard for me to believe with all the subject matter experts that we can look at this picture and not one person said, hey, this could be an issue, but yet everyone said, hey, we need another line, let's pull it through for said business or said, apartment complex that needs to go up. And I guess my second question would be, are there any conduits now along the corridor anywhere, downtown where this can happen, where the electrical and the fiber optic wires are still touching? And then kind of what are we doing right now? I know you guys kind of talked about it, but can you go into like how are you assessing what areas are high risk and what are your steps to kind of alleviate that?
So, and we have we keep a list of the most crowded ones that we try to move things around, just like the one on the Charles Street. We actually had moved some splice cases out of there between the first fire and the second fire. But there are issues in places with the overcrowding that we are working on addressing and kind of eliminating some of the coils and things like that, and to move some splice cases down to other manholes to free up some space in overcrowded manholes.
Yeah, and what percentage of those, just, I don't need the exact number, but that are old and no longer in use? And once again, what are we doing to get those out, I guess, first? Because, or if there are any that are currently underground that aren't in use and just literally taking up space?
So normally, if they're not used, it's immediately pulled out.
Okay.
And so that mostly because the lessee doesn't want to pay, then they don't have to pay for the duct system anymore.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make it clear as well, that is our policy not to allow the electrical lines and the fiber on the same duct to start with. So that's the policy that we have. And your first question was about having the duct, inside the same duct, having the fiber and electric lines on the same duct. And our policy clearly identified that they shouldn't be on the same duct, just to make it very clear.
Yeah, but obviously.
Yeah, and every time we see it, or every time it's identified to us, we'll make sure that this thing has been corrected. I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
And I also had a point of clarity. I know when the gentleman at the end noted that they reach out to 311, it is not literally 311. It's a Salesforce app, which is a back-end communication that comes directly to our conduit division. So it's not them calling 311 to say that we have a problem. And I know it seems minor, but it's actually pretty substantial to make that note of clarity that that's not who they're calling. They're calling us directly.
Councilman, you done? Awesome, thank you. I want to, the thing that was most helpful for me in this report was that it was the best attempt at explaining what caused the fires and may explain some of the fires or explosions that we have throughout the system going into the future. So one of the things that the report details is the impacts of accumulated gases within the conduit. And effectively, it says that gases accumulate from the deterioration of the coating around wires. That as wires heat up, those wires release gases. Those gases accumulate in the conduit and can be ignited. One thing it alludes to, and I think this is really helpful because I think, and I'll ask the question, and maybe it's a question of BGE, about arcing. It mentions arcing in the report, but it does not explicitly make clear that that can be the igniting source. Can you tell me a little bit about what arcing is and explain it to the public? And then also explain why the proximity is an issue, and explain why the gas accumulation is an issue, and how some of the recommended changes from the report will help to alleviate some of the risks that then come from the gas accumulation in the arcing.
I will do my best to answer your questions.
Thank
Just,
you.
clarity, I'm not an engineer, so the engineer is in the room, please excuse me, right? So the gases can be built up from, like they said, arcing of the cables. It can be from sewer gas. It can be from decaying materials that are buried in the ground, could be natural gas. So the gases could accumulate from multiple areas. The cable itself won't put off a gas unless the insulation has been damaged and faults. So, and arcing is going to occur when there's a breakdown in the insulation and that conductor, that electricity is trying to make it to ground or make it to, another conductor. So in this situation here, we don't know what caused the arc. I think you're assuming it's electric cable. It could be electric cable, right? So, the aging infrastructure could cause the terracotta to fall on the cable, right? It puts stress on that cable. That terracotta, like a clay pot, would break, is sharp, and it rubs against that insulation. That insulation could be damaged up in the conduit and cause that gases to build up, something that the city's inspection or my inspection won't see in that manhole because it's up in the conduit and creates that gas. The challenge is normally if we have a fault in our cable, it will clear itself and blow clear. But now that you add all that combustible fiber and plastic stuffed in that hole, one, it doesn't have a chance to vent and allow those gases to escape. And also, it has something combustible next to it to catch fire.
So I think this is important because one of the recommendations in the report is recommending expansion and recommending venting, recommending thermal monitoring and things like that will help us identify when we see heat levels rise to a point where the deterioration of the coating around these wires is more likely to degrade, and therefore you would have the buildup of gases. And then the known very likelihood that there will be arcing occasionally next to electric wires. And if they are too close to each other, the arcing can then ignite the gases, is I think what I took from the report.
It sounds feasible, yes.
Yeah. So it's super important for me because what it tells me is that one of the big things that we're going to have to do is create more space between our fiber wires that take up a lot of space in our conduit and our electrical wires, which are in in all of the conduit. And so one of the big expenses, and I think Vice Chair brought this up, was how do we then pay for it? So I think there are so many questions I have about how we run these issues up the chain when we know that we see overcrowding, when we see that there's a likelihood of a fire, when we see that there are risks that exist in our system. How do we then incorporate that into either maintenance, monitoring, or capital changes within the conduit? And when I think about the capital changes, how does that then fit into our conduit agreement that we currently have? And it's my understanding that that conduit agreement is being renegotiated as we speak. And I think it's going to be really important that we give ourselves the ability to maneuver within whatever agreement we decide to move into with BGE to make quick decisions so that when we have a fire, we don't have to wait a year to make the capital changes necessary to prevent the next one. So I think that is the foundation of, I think, what I want to walk away from this hearing with. We talked a little bit about how we're going to pay for it. So right now, we're under that agreement, and in that agreement, the first part of the agreement, BGE is spending $120 million, and I believe we've almost spent that in capital obligations during the initial term. How much of that has gone into manhole enlargement or congestion relief?
So to date, we started the construction, say, in June of 2023 under the new agreement. In that process, we have installed roughly 30 brand-new manholes with conduit just in case in the modernized system and environment, meeting city standards and BG&E standards, okay? We have also rebuilt the existing smaller manholes, 17 of them to date, and all but one was increased in length, width, side, and height. So that gives more room for the fiber optic companies and stuff to put their stuff away and make it where we can get in and out of the hole safely. And we've also built 3,000 feet, 300,000 feet of new conduit so that the city has some, partnering up with Josh and his team. It gives us the ability to lease more duct space out, to generalize more income and pay for these things that you're, recommending today. We've also, I think we've done roughly 800 obstructions where we've went in and fixed problems so that we could get the leasing cables back into place, where they were congested, clogged up and things like that. So I think we've made a great amount of progress with new manholes, enhancing the system, expanding the system, modernizing the things, and we did all of this work in roughly 3 years. So there's been a lot. Can we do better? I think there may be an opportunity to talk about some things and do better, but I think we've made a great effort and, some good data so far.
As a follow-up, would you guys be able to send us a list of all of the infrastructural investments we've made since the agreement and the locations of those investments?
So as part of the agreement, we already send all the city council members, DOT, everything that we do on a monthly, yearly basis. So we're getting ready to release February's, which would tell you what we've done since we've created the program and took it over and did all the capital expenses. So if you check into that, you probably already have it.
Can you send it again? And what I think would be helpful for me is identifying the locations. If we do have, for instance, a map of the investments made with 120 million thus far, that'll tell me, whether or not we're prioritizing the areas where we have the highest safety concerns, where we've had fires and otherwise.
Yeah, we can provide that. We do have a website where we show where all the work that we've done, all our project work is shown.
If you
and
can
we'll
get that
make
to
sure
me,
you get that.
would it be fine before the end of the month?
Yeah, it'll be, some of the stuff that we do is from the time we've had it to the time to now. And we will have out the new report. It just got out. We just need to approve it. And I'll make sure that you get it in addition to what we already send out.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last piece here is, I know we spent we pretty much have spent through the $120 million. Why didn't we focus on this area? Manhole 87, knowing that we just had a fire that January.
So the manholes that we rebuilt, we partnered with Baltimore City and to see what they want to rebuild, right? So when this manhole came up on the list, it's something we rebuilt. Charles Street is a very challenging area that's been reported on by many so far with the infrastructure and everything close in proximity. We do have additional work in the area, and in all candor, after the first fire, we inspected everything in the area. We were trying to stay out of that way to not impact the businesses. The manhole that we're doing now has been impactful to the businesses. We've been, trying to minimize that impact. There's also construction on Charles Street that's impacting some of the lanes. Yeah. And as a result, we can't do our work until some of the scaffolding comes down. We have worked on the other end of the block down there at Charles and Lombard as well to do some manhole rebuilds. But we do have additional projects in the Charles Street corridor, but it's mainly trying to coordinate with the other work that's going on the corridor and trying to be respectful of the businesses in that area as well.
I understand. We certainly, they've been inconvenienced a ton, and we certainly don't want them to be inconvenienced any further by not resolving the issue. I think also in light of that consideration, DOT has already said that they have a list of congested manholes that are of concern. And given that we know that congestion plays an important role in the likelihood of gas accumulation and then potentially fires and explosion, if we could share that list, I would appreciate it. If we can fashion that to the committee, that'd be helpful as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. We'll look into what we can share and get back to you.
Is there a problem with sharing the list of congested manholes?
We'll confer after the committee hearing, as we always do, once we get all of the requests, and then we'll be able to respond to what information we can share.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't share it?
It's critical infrastructure, sensitive infrastructure. So we want to be mindful about sharing certain things. So we'll follow up and then we'll get back to the committee.
Okay. Councilwoman, you had a question? Please, go ahead.
I want to follow back up on your question, sir. My apologies. Did I hear you say you share a report with the council on a monthly basis?
That is correct. We have a report that goes out to all of the city councilmen, including DOTs and all the different, people who would be interested in that report.
What is this report? I just checked with my colleague. We don't remember seeing this monthly report. We get daily reports of the work that's happening, but you're mentioning a monthly report that's being
Yeah,
sent
there's
out?
a monthly report that we put together and send out as well on what progress we made in each month leading up to.
When's the last time you sent it?
It comes out every month. We get ready to send out
So you should have got one
February now.
you should have got one in January, would have
Yeah.
been for the end of the year. You probably should have got one for February.
Who would it come
Yeah,
from?
who would it come from?
It comes from the BG&E Conduit Group mailbox. We can check your emails afterwards. We have a list of it. We actually list the work by council district, so you know what work's going on in your district. Anytime we do a major project in your district, you get the same letter. The council should get the same letter to that email that your members get, so you're in tune with it. The projects, like Sterling said, are also listed on our BG&E website, where you can look at the projects, see the detailed plans, and what the traffic impact is and what the conduit project impact is. But we've been sending those reports since the beginning of the conduit agreement as part of that agreement.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to have the full list of where the investments have been made, if only to make sure, if the administration will share the list of priorities, that it aligns. Because I think while it's important that we're making historic investments in our conduit, if we're not making them in the areas that are exploding, it doesn't matter. So I think that's the key for us. I want to make sure that that alignment is happening is to the best of our ability, especially knowing that some of these structural changes must happen to avoid the accumulation of gases and overcrowding. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably for the Deputy Mayor again. Obviously, this is a challenge that's not unique in America, but there are like a limited number of cities that are as old and dense as we are. And I'm sure they're having, now that fiber is coming up, right? Like there's relatively recent things that are making this harder than it was 40, 50 years ago. Is there another city that's doing the recommendation, like doing it well, that we are like, this is a good model and what they're doing makes sense, and we can look at that and say, yeah, this is generally the direction we want to move in?
I think for cities that are similarly aged, if you will, as ours, or seasoned, as I'll say, I think they're facing a lot of the same situations as us. So I don't think so much as they're doing it better, but I think they're in very similar situations where they're recognizing that they are trying to make the necessary modifications, whether it be adding sensors, whether the sensors are being subsequently moving towards AI, as Councilwoman Porter said. But I wouldn't necessarily pinpoint a city that I would consider like an old transit city, or someone old like us, like a Boston, like a Washington, D.C., and things like that, that wouldn't necessarily be in a space or place that they aren't having similar challenges right now, but also they're facing them in the same capacity that we're doing it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Director. I do think that I would imagine there's a spectrum of like, from DC to Boston, right? We're probably all in similar situations and have varying amounts of like how far along in addressing it we are. And I just think it's an important part of looking at how to solve it, is to see who's got a similar issue and is further along.
Again, if I could just add, I mean, I actually did some research on this to look at other places, and like clearly we're not alone in having these underground fires. As far as what I could tell, I think where we are ahead is in terms of commissioning a study like this to actually do sort of a soup to nuts report and look at what's causing these and what are recommendations. I didn't find that anywhere from any of the other cities that have had these fires. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I mean, if there's one out there, maybe I missed it. But so I think, and again, while there are fires in the underground conduit system in many of these other cities, we don't necessarily know it was the same cause as that these fires have been. And frankly, I think even the different fires that have occurred in Baltimore may at times have been caused by different issues. But I would just flag, I think that that's something that, you know, is really important, that by being a little more proactive and going and investing the resources into getting a report and actually developing a plan, I didn't see that from any of the other municipalities that I looked at.
Let me add one more thing. We're probably also, as you know, very unique that we own our own conduit system. And not many cities around the country they own their conduit system. So that's create a specific set of challenges and differences than any other city around the country from that perspective.
It does make sense that that could be a unique issue there. Not to, tell the professionals in front of me, how to do y'all's work or whatever, but I do think that the problem with being the trailblazer is it's a lot of work to blaze a trail. And if you don't have to blaze it, right, sometimes it's sometimes better to not be the first people to do something, right? Obviously, if we have to be like, this situation is urgent, we need to fix it. But I guess, I would feel more confident in, it's great what's being presented today, and there's clearly a lot of work being done and being prioritized, but I would feel more confident if there was a more maybe thorough answer from the administration of looking a little harder to see, and maybe we're in the forefront of it, right? But maybe we're not. And if we're not, then that would be good to know that, hey, Philly, has done X, Y, and Z, and they really screwed up at this first part, but then they figured it out. So let's not screw up like what they did, right?
Councilman, I would say is that there is not a clear somebody who's leaps and bounds far ahead. But there are, as we said, all of us are kind of in this together, and but reaching out, and we've already begun that process of reaching out and learning the lessons that what they've gone through to understand where we can either follow or not go down that path also, because for whatever X, Y, and Z reasons, so that we're learning from each other.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily, there's not a clear roadmap, but there are still lessons to be learned. And that's, I think, where we're headed.
Yeah, 1,000% to staff. As long as we are doing that thoroughly, we need to move fast, but we also don't want to spend money in ways that end up not solving the problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I want to, I still don't understand what our process is for escalating concerns. And I think this is going to be really important for the coordination with BGE and for the identification of problems with DOT. So when we had this fire in January, presumably we knew that there was an issue in this particular manhole. Did we notify BGE that there's a problem here?
So after the January fire, we took a look at the surrounding manholes and identified that one as crowded. As you can see, that it was crowded. We worked with some of the lessees to start getting the amount. I think there were 13 splice boxes in there at one point. And as the September fire happened, I think there was 7 or 8. So we had started getting some of the lessees to start moving them down the line into separate manholes so that we could start clearing that out little by little. So usually when we see something like that, that's what we try to do, is get a, total number of the boxes and try to limit and talk with the lessees and say, what can we move where, or what's the easiest for them to move to start off with, down to another manhole that may not be as crowded.
We'd noticed that there was an issue. We tried to take what changes, it sounds like we could, by moving boxes and arranging lines. And then I guess for BGE, why didn't we escalate that effort knowing we had a fire and concerns and overcrowding in that area?
So after the first fire, what we did was we inspected our manholes, our equipment, and found everything to be, safe at that time. As far as the overcrowded manhole, like DOT has stated, they were working on clearing that manhole. Being in the utility industry, it takes time to move things. Fiber optic outages, I can only imagine what it takes to get those, when that fire happened up there and some of those fibers were out. I was amazed to find out that some of that connectivity was the places on the Eastern Shore. I was surprised. So I'm sure it takes time for that fiber company to move it. We were not the owner of the manhole. We were respecting the city's process of working with the lessees.
So I know we noted that we've already expanded or replaced 30 or so manholes. Why had not this one been addressed, or at least put on a list, a high priority list in January, or was it not prioritized? I mean, I'm sure it's a priority now, but how do we escalate to make sure that we are responsive to concerns like this? Because I believe ultimately the decision on whether or not we make the investment it's up to BGE, I believe. Is that correct?
So yes, but we go by the Baltimore City's recommendations as well, right? So Baltimore City provided a list of manholes for us to rebuild. This particular manhole wasn't on the list at that time. As soon as Baltimore City expedited that to us to say they want to rebuild it, we started rebuilding that right away.
Do you guys have the list of congested manholes?
We probably have some that we have in the plan.
So they have the list that we send them for recommended that would like to have rebuilt. And so after the September fire, that's when we talked about trying to get the other one rebuilt. The one that's being rebuilt right now at Charles.
After September.
At Charles and Pleasant, right. Because the fire wasn't in that manhole then. The fire was in an adjacent vault on the sidewalk. It wasn't in that manhole. But that's when we started looking further around that intersection.
So in the January fire, it was in manhole 87, according to...
The January fire was in a vault on the sidewalk.
I see.
The September,
Near
the September
87.
fire, correct. Yeah, where the manhole, and where it's being rebuilt now, right on that sidewalk in front of that building.
Got it. And so did we request any expansion of the conduit in that area? Was that a part of the list?
So during this rebuild, and for any manhole that we want rebuilt, the objective is always to make it bigger.
Better question. When did we request the expansion?
I'll have to look into that. And it wouldn't have necessarily been an expansion. It would have just been a manhole rebuild. Like we wouldn't have specifically said expansion. We would just looked at it to rebuild the manhole.
To clarify, I think, is that when we rebuild manholes, we always seek to expand. So when Josh says it was just a request to rebuild, it is a rebuild and expand.
I see. We don't rebuild at the same capacity.
Because we know that we have modern needs that require us to expand and go further. So where real estate allows us to expand in that location, we will do.
And when did that request go in?
We can. We'll follow up and get the request.
Okay. I think what I want to get to the bottom of here is we are seeing operational challenges based on capacity, based on aging infrastructure and otherwise that require capital needs, which BGE determines where we make that investment, and require operational changes, better venting and so on and so forth, and more oversight. And I think we need to make sure that all of those things are happening in some regularity in order to make sure that we can escalate these issues when they arise. I want to, Actually, I'll turn on any other questions from folks on the committee. All right. I invited out both the Comptroller's Office here today, and also invited out OPC, the Office of People's Counsel, to speak to, I think, some of the questions around the agreement that we have with BGE. I know when the agreement was moved, it happened very quickly, and not without some frustration. If you could introduce yourself, I'd like you to explain to me what hesitations the comptroller had in the initial passing of the conduit agreement, if you could.
Okay. All right, good afternoon, Chair Conway, as well as the other esteemed members of the Council and Committee. My name is Erica McClammy. I'm the Deputy Controller in the Office of Baltimore City Controller Bill Henry. In response to Chair Conway's request, I'm here to give testimony regarding Legislative Oversight 25-0025, specifically as it relates to the history of the amendment to the settlement agreement with Baltimore Gas and Electric, which restructured how BG&E and the city make capital investments and maintenance payments, and the controller's role in scrutinizing that amendment. Just for timeline purposes, Baltimore City's conduit system is a publicly owned asset that generates revenue used for its maintenance and long-term capital needs. In 2015, the city increased conduit fees based on the consultant's report identifying necessary infrastructure investments. Following litigation, the city entered into a settlement agreement that required all collected conduit fees to be spent exclusively on conduit upkeep or return to BG&E. That agreement expired in 2022. In 2023, rather than renewing the prior agreement under similar terms, the administration negotiated a revised structure in which BG&E would make capital improvements directly instead of continuing to pay usage fees. This deal was made public in late January 2023. On February 14, 2023, the administration rejected a request from then Council President Mosby as chair of the Board of Estimates to defer the vote on that amendment. On February 15, 2023, at the Board of Estimates hearing, the mayor and his appointees to the Board of Estimates voted to approve the amended agreement with the Controller Henry and President Mosby absent. In the 3 weeks between the amendment becoming public and the board's action, neither the Controller's Office nor the City Council, despite repeated requests, was provided with updated comprehensive data demonstrating that the proposed capital commitment is sufficient to meet the current and long-term needs of the conduit system. When the deal went to the board, nearly every conduit user sent in letters of opposition. It is not an overstatement to say that outside of the mayor's office, there was simply no understanding from any party of the financial implications or logistics of that agreement. Subsequent developments underscored our concerns. In December 2023, the Maryland Public Service Commission approved a $400 million multi-year rate increase for BG&E to fund infrastructure improvements. BG&E is not allowed to use a higher franchise fee as a justification to the Public Service Commission to charge higher rates. But by spending the same amount of money as direct improvements to the conduit, it counts as a capital expenditure, which allows them to pass on that cost to ratepayers directly. The mayor's office argued that this would help BG&E realize savings. However, instead, we've seen rising prices and increased costs put on the shoulders of our residents. So here we are, crucially, at a crucial time. The city is 9 months away from the conclusion of the initial term of BG&E's capital improvement obligation. This contract automatically renews for 3 succeeding years. The Controller's Office is committed to working with the Council to provide oversight and scrutiny as we look for solutions to this issue. We need to examine, it's our hope that we actually examine this entire process so our residents aren't carrying the burden of bad past decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned, I don't know if you have this answer. If you don't, I have the answer, but I'm asking you anyway. We're coming out on the end of that agreement. When is the last moment for us to make changes to the next agreement?
I can't answer that question about the last, about when's the last time we can actually make changes to the agreement. I wouldn't be the best person to answer that one.
I believe it is April 4th to make changes to the agreement.
Okay.
And then, should we get to this point, the last day to exit the conduit agreement is July 4th. And so I think that's important for us to think about what changes we might need to make in order to address the issues that we have here today.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Chair?
Please, go ahead.
So the agreement ends at the end of 2026. There are some built-in deadlines like notifying BGE that we want to renegotiate. I think that's the April deadline that you're referring to. That doesn't mean that's the last time we can make changes. We can make changes at any point. We could extend the agreement and make changes later on, but I think the deadlines, the dates that you're referring to, it's the agreement obviously ends at the end of 2026. If we wanted to notify them of our intent to negotiate that, that's the April date. And I believe there's another date in July, or sometime over the summer, where we would notify them of our intent not to extend.
Sure. My understanding is that the April 5th date is our last opportunity to amend the agreement, to make changes to the agreement. And actually, how about this? We'll make it a follow-up. If you can clarify for us what the deadlines are for this agreement so that we can make sure that we have a system that adequately allows us to address some of the challenges that we've identified here today, that'd be really helpful. And then also the last day for us to exit the agreement, should we decide that that's necessary, I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, it's. I think you said it was April 4th is to inform them of our intent to renegotiate, and then the July date is the informing them of our intent not to continue the agreement.
Got it. And we'll confirm that with a follow-up. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And then I've got Mark Sisbis from the Office of People's Counsel. I was hoping you guys could walk us through, if you could turn that mic off.
Sure.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd walk us through the case you're in right now. I understand where you guys are appealing the rate agreement in court right now, and it has something to do with this conduit agreement. Can you articulate why that is and what we're looking to accomplish?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Comedy. Again, I'm a senior assistant People's Counsel with the Office of People's Counsel. For those who are not familiar with us, we are an independent state agency. Our job is to represent the interest of residential utility customers. That mostly happens in proceedings before the Public Service Commission. We also represent our clients before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in Annapolis, here, so forth and so on. We started working on these conduit issues at BGE's last multi-year rate case, which was filed on February 17th, 2023, just a couple days after that Board of Estimates hearing that we heard about and that the Commission approved in December of 2023. BGE proposed in that case to recover all of the costs of its capital improvements in the conduit from its customers with a return. In other words, BGE proposed that they would treat its capital improvements in a conduit owned by City of Baltimore in the same way that it recovers investments in property that it owns, which is a pretty extraordinary step. And we took the position in that proceeding that it was such an extraordinary departure from the historic arrangement between the city and BGE that really, before consummating that agreement, BGE should have come to the commission and said, hey, we're looking to do something new. Can you give us your blessing? But they chose to have the contract executed and bring it to the commission as a fait accompli and then seek cost recovery from customers. And long story short, at the end of that case, the commission approved cost recovery. So that $120 million for the first term of the agreement that extends through the end of the current calendar year, the commission allowed BGE to build those investments into the rates that we are paying right now and will continue to pay through the end of 2026. Again, with a return for BGE on those investments. We challenged the commission's decision in Baltimore City Circuit Court. The argument was supposed to be held on January 27th. It was postponed because of snow, and now it's scheduled to be heard on March 27th. There are a couple different grounds for our challenge. I think two of which get into kind of complex utility law and may not be really of interest to the commission or to the council or certainly to to the crux of the hearing today. But one I think very much is based on the conversations that we've had today, and that is that BGE, as part of this agreement, is making capital improvements, recovering all of the costs from its customers, but those improvements are benefiting not just BGE, which, as has been discussed, occupies 70 to 80% of the conduit, but other conduit tenants as well. Now, those other conduit tenants may not benefit in the same way, and an improvement here may benefit this particular tenant and not the other tenant, but by the terms of the agreement, the improvements that BGE makes under this contract have to have common benefit. So the other conduit tenants are benefiting, but BGE's customers are paying the entirety of those improvements. And we don't think that's fair. We think given that the distribution of the benefits, there should be contribution from those other conduit tenants as well to these costs. Now, under the current arrangement of the contract, those other tenants are paying amounts to the city. And based on what I've heard today, we've never had visibility into those costs. We don't know the exact amounts they're paying. Based on what I've heard today, it sounds as though they're all paying the same amounts, and there's a kind of recognition on the part of the city that those amounts are too low, and they're not going to need to be increased. Under the terms of the agreement, though, the city is currently using those mostly for routine maintenance of the conduit. The city still reserves the right under the current contract, the 2023 amendment to the 2016 amendment, to do capital improvements. We don't have visibility into what the city is doing as opposed to what BGE is doing. But just based on the numbers, on the fact that BGE is putting $120 million of capital investments into the conduit, it seems that other tenants of the conduit are reaping benefits. And effectively what this amounts to is a subsidy by BGE customers to all these other conduit tenants, the Comcasts and Xfinities and Crown Castles and so forth and so on. My understanding is there are dozens of other conduit tenants who are benefiting in different degrees depending on what work BGE is doing and the extent to which those tenants occupy the conduit. So, we've challenged the Commission's decision to allow BGE to recover all of the costs from its customers as unlawful under the Public Utilities Article. That appeal is pending before the Baltimore City Circuit Court right now. They will make a decision about whether we're right or whether we're wrong. But meanwhile, just wanted to present that information for benefit of the city as it considers potentially renegotiating this agreement.
Thank you, Mark. So you're saying that right now, ratepayers, people who are paying their energy bills, are paying for these expansions, and more specifically that these expansions have already, and increasingly so by necessity, intended to create a safer system, but for fiber. Essentially, we are creating space so that we can accommodate all the fiber that we have in our conduit, and that is ending up ultimately on our energy bills.
I think that's correct. It sounds as though some of these improvements, to the extent that the work that BGE is doing is creating new space, and that the benefits of that space go to new fiber tenants rather than to BGE's customer, then to us that looks like a direct subsidy from BGE customers to those other tenants.
And those capital expenses are capitalized.
Correct. They're capitalized, and we are paying them. The first term, that $120 million, is built into the rates that we started paying in 2023, and that extend at least until the end of 2026.
I appreciate that. So I think part of I think why the initial reticence, or at least hesitance on the deal, was so important to the council was because we saw this problem coming. And I think we are now at a decision point on whether or not, given the challenges we have in the conduit, given the significant investment that we have to make, we want to make sense of what the next best step is. We want to make sure that our conduit is safe. We want to make sure that we have the funding in order to improve our conduit and prevent fires. We want to avoid, I would expect, putting those bills on people trying to pay their energy bills, especially because we're doing so in order to offer people fiber, which is really important. But I appreciate you for walking us through that. I think that's really, really important. Councilwoman, you got a question?
I do. Thank you so much, sir. I'm sorry, remind me your name again, sir.
Mark Shebist.
I'm sorry?
First name Mark, last
Mark.
name Shebist.
May I call you Mark?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. And so most of my community, so I serve South Baltimore, Cherry Hill, Westport, Brooklyn, and they experience significant brownouts. Whenever there's a weather-related storm, any type of issues that happen related to like wind change. And so when we're talking, talk to me about how we can make sure that doesn't happen. And so with increased fiber, with increased fiber and networking, we're getting more power to people. And so walk me through how we can make sure that doesn't occur in my communities.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Can I
more-
clarify one thing? So there's a difference between our electrical wires and our fiber. Fiber is generally the internet connections and telecoms.
That too.
Yep.
Yeah, that too.
Yep.
So thank you for that.
Yep.
And Councilwoman, to clarify, you're talking about the above-ground infrastructure.
I am, and so Councilman Conway, thank you for that clarification, and I did mean fiber. So we typically go through brownouts related to internet connectivity in South Baltimore as well. And so not only from an electrical perspective, just power in general, but also from an internet connectivity perspective. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman. The PSC has various proceedings that go to reliability. There's a docket, if memory serves, the case number is 9353, which is a continuing docket in which utilities sort of propose plans kind of specifically for purpose of reliability. And I think that is mostly the context where specific issues like this affecting specific communities are raised and where the utility says it needs to invest. I'll be honest that I do not work on that docket, but there are, the PSC has metrics and the acronyms are SAIDI and SAFE that sort of measure how reliable a system is. And the utilities are supposed to be identifying parts of their system that are less reliable and targeting investments to those systems.
So let me ask this question. If we don't necessarily establish the connectivity, what's the outcome?
The connectivity for the fiber? Well, I think where you're going is the connectivity of the new fiber is very important to have.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. Is because the conversation that we've seen is that we don't want to add more, but in some situations, in some communities, that more is really important to the community.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of construction.
There's a balance.
Yeah, and there's a need for new capital investment. I mean, we have never disputed that. For us, the question is just, how are the costs recovered? And are they being recovered in an equitable way?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why I think this discussion is really important is because I think we know we need high-speed internet for our neighborhoods, and we know there's still too many that don't have it sufficiently. The question, though, is should people having to pay their heat bill have to pay for it and have it capitalized? And I think one of the things that stood out to me most when I saw the terms of the agreement was the eventual cost. So if we did the whole agreement, $200 and something million, over the course of the lifetime of the agreement, it would end up costing $800 and something million.
But that's a contractual clause and negotiation that we can assume from a city perspective. I'm not saying that individual ratepayers should have to assume those costs. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that the conversation needs to be balanced in a way that the communities that do not have this type of infrastructure, they are also included in the conversation, not just from a ratepayer perspective, but ratepayer or payer perspective, but also making sure that they receive the infrastructure that they need as well. So again, my communities don't have that infrastructure, and they need that infrastructure. And so we are building many homes in the area. There are currently, right now, our public housing facilities, when we have inclement weather events, again, their internet goes out and their power goes out. And so that has been happening for at least 10 years now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the urgency and the need is there. I think the question is, should energy ratepayers have to pay for it? And the difficulty in choosing between having a warm home and internet is it's a very difficult decision to make. But I think we need to have these conversations because I think most people don't understand that the capital expenses here that we know are necessary from a basic safety perspective, especially now, are going to end up hitting our energy bills.
Yeah, but also, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I can go after you go. Okay, just to add a little context, in parts of the city that are not served by the conduit system, BGE has like utility poles, right? And that's what I think we're talking about mostly in your district, the utility poles with lots of overhead wires. Those poles are used both by BGE for all its own electrical wires and by lots of other folks as well. Like companies like Verizon and Comcast, they will hang wires on those poles as well, and they pay BGE a fee to do that. Those fees are set by the Federal Communications Commission, and the idea is that, you know, those fees mitigate the amount that ratepayers pay for the pole. So there's a fair contribution on the part of those other tenants. I think what we see with the conduit is a very different kind of arrangement, where we have BGE providing a kind of construction of conduit sections and reconstruction of conduit sections that is benefiting in the same way some of these other tenants, but those tenants are not contributing to the cost borne by BGE's customers.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get to the public testimony, I just want to briefly shout out, as the council member for the 11th District, the very, very substantial impact that this whole situation, both the fires and then the necessary but very problematic for the sake of the businesses in the footprint, particularly on North Charles Street, the impact that all this situation is having. We have, there is a lot of challenges with retail in downtown, which is not unique to our downtown. Obviously, this is a national thing, but it's pretty bad in downtown Baltimore. And then to overlap what's been going on with the businesses, and we have some, really, actually wonderful businesses and restaurants on those couple blocks of Charles Street. I appreciate the work that both DOT and BG have been responsive in trying to accommodate this, but we have some businesses that have been there for a long time that are really concerned about going out of business. And so, I think at least one person might be here to testify in support of this, but just to talk further on it. But I know I had the owner of Stem and Vine who couldn't make it today, but did send me a couple sentences of a text just to emphasize the point that Charles Street is a national urban historic byway. There's only 5 of them in the country. If you walk from downtown, up downtown Charles Street, it's actually, the architecture is incredible. You can imagine how a couple decades ago, and God willing, not that far in the future, it's going to be incredible again. But this is a real challenge, and I just ask that both the administration and BG and everyone involved in this current conversation, if there are ways where you can help get those businesses back on their feet, this would be really meaningful for 1,000 different reasons. So, yes, that's what I have there. I also want to shout out Vicinity. Hey, Vicinity, thanks for joining us today. And a good opportunity to shout out Energy going to the effort that y'all are making to go to the electric boilers and the importance that's going to have on bringing Baltimore into a cleaner energy future and the impact that has for all of us. So appreciate that, but I'll pass back to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, we're gonna move into public testimony. Appreciate everybody coming out, bearing my tough questions. I think, we want to make sure that ultimately we serve folks to the best degree possible, and that we think hard about how to best do that. So I have one person signed up. If anybody else is signed up and wants to testify, please do so after this person. I've got Ava Hodson.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Council. My name is Ava Hodgson, and I serve as the Chair of Charles Street Development, representing the businesses and property owners along the Charles Street corridor. I'm here today to speak plainly about the devastating impact of the underground fires on our stretch of Charles Street. These were not minor service interruptions. They were catastrophic events that shut down blocks, displaced businesses, restricted access, and created months of uncertainty. Storefronts went dark, employees lost hours, some businesses lost their entire peak seasons, some closed permanently. For many of our small operators, retailers, salons, restaurants, service providers, margins are already razor thin. One prolonged disruption can mean the difference between survival and closure. And right now, we are asking the small businesses affected by these fires to run a marathon kneecapped. They are navigating never-ending construction. They have absorbed physical damage to their spaces. They are dealing with interrupted utilities, barricaded sidewalks, lost foot traffic, lost parking, and rising insurance costs. And hanging over all of that is the same question of, will this happen again? That looming uncertainty is in many ways the most damaging piece. Investment depends on predictability. Entrepreneurs invest their savings, property owners invest millions into redevelopment, lenders evaluate risk, national retailers conduct due diligence, and they all ask the same question: can you guarantee this won't happen again? We cannot, and that is a problem. How are we supposed to ask large employers, local operators, and first-time entrepreneurs to invest their dreams into Baltimore when we cannot guarantee the utilities under their storefront won't literally blow those dreams up the way that Viva Bookstore? Downtown is already working to recover from the impacts of the pandemic and changing office dynamics. Charles Street is a historic, cultural, and economic spine of our city, but revitalization cannot happen on unstable infrastructure. We need accountability, we need transparency, we need a clear plan for infrastructure assessment, modernization, and communication, and we need meaningful support for the businesses who have unfairly carried the financial burden of these failures. Our businesses want to believe in Baltimore, and they are choosing to stay, but that belief must be matched by action from the utilities and this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Is there any further testimony, anyone looking to testify? All right, seeing none, that concludes our testimony. Once again, I want to thank everybody for, one, the hard work you guys put into making sure that this report is actually helpful. I eagerly look forward to figuring out what changes we need to make operationally to make sure that this never happens again. These are real people, these are real businesses, and thank God no one has been injured or harmed thus far because of these fires, but we certainly don't want that to happen again and create an opportunity for that to happen. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we have a system that works, a system that is responsive and can escalate these issues to whoever is going to make the decision, and that those decisions are on the behalf of safety first, and then everything else after that. So with that, I appreciate all of the feedback and all of the partnership, and look forward to settling this in the end. With that, this hearing is in recess.